If there was no crime at all, speeding, parking, loitering, little BS citations that don't really affect you but bother you, how would this country run? How would this world be? It'd be a lot better because you wouldn't have to pay stupid citations, but your government would probably implode on itself and anarchy would persist. Your hard-earned tax dollars aren't being used the way they're supposed to. They're being used to fill up the pockets of these greedy politicians instead of making your community better. And I'm gonna tell you one way they've been doing it and why it's important for you to start asking the questions like, what is this number all about? Texas is one of the biggest states in the country, and it benefits from having some of the greatest companies right here on our soil contribute to the socioeconomic status by providing jobs and allowing our economic status to be competitive from a state front. But how much of those big companies are paying their weight in taxes? Nowhere near as much as you would think, as it takes about $113 million a year just to keep Texas above average. But you'll be surprised to know that a vast majority of this money comes from federal and state tax. Texas residents don't pay state tax, so where does the vast majority of this money come from? This graph dictates and shows us that it comes from our taxed dollars, our property tax and such other things. But this big chunk here just says state tax. And then you find out there was a census done in 2013 to dictate what this chunk was, but it doesn't generate any responses. It doesn't tell you exactly what state tax is. State tax could be anything from the taxes from your groceries to property tax to license plate revenue, or my favorite, taxes acquired through revenue investigated crimes. What are revenue investigated crimes? These are crimes that you commit that require officers to investigate, then also require them to fine you or penalize you in order to gain revenue. These crimes vary from anything from speeding to illegal U-turns or changing lanes without your turn signal. These fines and penalties do make sense in the broad scope of things, but when 36% of those fines attribute $90 million as a state in revenue, and just by demographics, Forbes was able to figure out how much per person, if every person was to be fined once in the state of Texas per city, how much they would be paying. But don't let this number deceive you. As small as it looks, we also know that demographically speaking, black people are more likely to be pulled over in the United States 6 to 1. So with that in mind, it's fair to say that a vast majority of this money, these fines and these penalties, are coming from low-income individuals and minorities. Then don't let me deceive you, because you'll never see an officer trying to pull over a Tesla in downtown Dallas to give him a citation for anything. But there has to be measures that have been put in place to stop and prevent such heinous crimes from ever happening in the first place, right? In 1975, there was a law placed to basically stop officers or city officials from imposing very harsh rules or mandates. These quota systems could easily be alleviated by the state imposing a 36% tax cap, which basically says 36% of all city revenue has to go to the state. They have to give 36% of that citation immediately to the state, which would help deter a lot of officials from doing this, because if citizens in your community continue to pay speeding tickets in order for you to make up for the 36% loss, there would clearly be an uproar, as most people are okay with paying speeding tickets as long as it happens once in a while. But when you talk to a few black people, for example Philando Castile, who was stopped 12 times in 1 month, it gets a little irritating. These laws ostensibly did their job, but there's one major loophole in them, and the loophole was basically, if an officer was able to add any additional charges to that initial traffic citation charge, that city would be able to keep the whole entire fine for themselves. This usually led to a bunch of trumped up charges being added onto speeding tickets, and usually done behind closed doors, as most people would traditionally just take the speeding ticket, and after they've assigned or accepted the speeding ticket, the officer would then and check off several other things that the individual was not found guilty of doing at the time of crime, but was presumed to be guilty of such crime because they were guilty of a lesser crime. For example, a person being pulled over and accused of speeding, 10 months later received an insurance hike to his bill because he was deemed an unsafe driver based on the point system that was given to him because he was pulled over, and his routine speeding ticket got trumped up to charges that had nothing to do with his original charge, such as driving aggressively, not abiding to street signs, and legal speed limits, which doesn't really mean much in the grand scope of things, but to an insurance company gives them the reason to ante up your charges and fees, and if they can, they will. Over 100 lawsuits that spanned over 127 smaller counties throughout the greater Texas areas. These small counties had no choice but to trump up charges in order to get and make up for revenue that they lost because of the 36% cap mark. After paying out countless lawsuits, the state of Texas decided to alleviate and deviate from this quota system that they don't really have, but for some reason they keep getting in trouble for having, even though it definitely doesn't exist, but we all know it really exists. So that original law was then changed again in order to state that after the 36% mark, the money would then be directed inwards to things that would help better the community, such as the schools, streets, paying for small business ventures that will help the community become better. But that wasn't enough. So what else can we do to help fix this problem? There's two major ways you fix this problem. One, adding more oversight in order for us to better delegate and understand where our tax dollars go when they are generated. And two, all generated revenue must be accounted for, so we don't have a situation where budgets, pensions, and other nonsensical things that don't matter to people who are paying get pushed to the front of the line instead of the more important things we care about, like our schools, our streets, community health standards, and safeties. With a little bit of more oversight and the better understanding of the logistical trail of our money, it's fair to say that we would be able to stop this whole quota system that definitely doesn't exist, but we all know really exists, from really harming our community and creating even a bigger divide amongst the police and the people. Okay, it's time to talk about this number. I saw a video on Facebook about an officer who stopped a man for making an illegal U-turn, I believe. And that officer made the same illegal U-turn, pursued that individual, stopped him, and tried to write him a citation. And he probably would have got the citation if it wasn't for the fact the officer overreacted and pulled his gun out and shot him. I'm kidding. He lived, and that's shocking. But what's even more shocking, what else isn't that officer adequately trained to do? I find it strange that our officers aren't trained in CPR, ALS, or PLS, or any life-saving procedures for that matter. Seeing as how they're the first person at every scene of a crime, or traditionally creating harm on somebody who they probably had no business harming in the first place, it baffles me that they're not equipped to properly handle situations where support is needed. But when you take a closer look at this number and realize that this number is dedicated to how many rape kits have gone untested in the state of Texas, you then begin to realize crimes that generate revenue are more important than crimes that cost, because it costs $1,500 to test a rape kit. An officer pulls over 10 people and gives them all speeding tickets. He's made $1,300 for the city. That's nearly how much it costs to pay for one rape kit testing. So it begs the question, in a country where 9,427 rapes happen a year, and Texas accounts for 20% of those, what's more important to the police officers who have taken an oath to uphold the Constitution and protect and serve you? Pulling over a man for making a U-turn and nearly blowing his brains all over the street for $130, or going out and finding the 6 sadistic individuals responsible for raping innocents? And if you really believe that they're more concerned with solving these crimes than they are making money, remember, they didn't start keeping track of this until they were forced to in 2016. Here's some advice. Next time you get pulled over by an officer and he asks you, do you know why he pulled you over? Simply tell him, you pulled me over to avoid doing a more important job. And when he asks you what job that is, send him to this video, because this number is going to keep counting. 248 more get added every day.